For me, the day started quite early in the morning, and as you recall, it was a very hot morning. I hired a crew from LA, and we had gone up there early in the morning to replace that antenna system. And it was so hot, it was almost impossible to work, but we had to do it because it had to be done.
That morning, it was so hot by 10:30 in the morning that our automatic air cooling system went on, and it had never gone on before about 3 in the afternoon before. So we knew it was a bad day and the winds were bad.
I was running around the property just doing my usual thing, taking care of business, doing this, doing that. And oh, it was hot that day. I mean, it was so hot. Everybody wanted to take a nap. You know, it's just...
And if you recall, it was a very hot day. And we had spent the day just trying to keep cool, and we were walking around barefoot. Everybody had shorts on.
We had felt that something was going to happen, so we had built up on some of our stockpiles and things like that, and kept our teams on alert because the temperatures and the winds were so extreme at that time.
I said, this is just like the days of the Sycamore fire that led up to it. And he said, he asked me if I was worried about being burned out, and I said, nah, my house will never burned. I've taken the proper precautions. I have a Class A roof. I've done the right kind of landscaping near the house.
We also had a friend who was living with us at the time, and the morning before the fire, she had a bad feeling inside, so she took her photo albums and put them in her trunk before she went to work. And that was the last time she was able to see anything else that she had.
But I remember real vividly standing in my bedroom, looking at my watch on my hand and saying, nah, I'm gonna keep it on. And I've no idea why I did it. But, you know, I mean, to have lost that would have just been the most awful thing because it's just one of my most treasured possessions.
I said, I think there's gonna be a fire tonight. I mean, just everything was shimmering. It was so hot. It's never been so hot in Santa Barbara before. And it just seemed like there was gonna be a fire, but it would be tonight.
These canyons, some of them have not burned in 75 to 80, 85 years. The chaparral hills, the chaparral-covered hills behind Santa Barbara are at times, as they were in June and July of last year, just comparable to grass soaked in gasoline. The volatility of the vegetation up there is such that it actually has an oily residue. And if there is some incendiary device that torches it off, it can burn just like gasoline does.
They'd gone into a red flag. That's where we drive around in four-wheel drive vehicles, just checking over the area and making sure that we're right on top of things if it happens. We always have, we go through this so much of the possibilities there that we didn't expect this fire caught us off guard.
For 35 Sam 3, you're to disregard the alarm calls and go to Painted Cave for the spot fire that's reported there.
We saw the smoke in the distance, and we went up the hill, and we could see it kind of encroaching on our house. At that point is when we first started getting worried.
A friend of mine from down below came up to help. He had seen the fire up in the hills, and I said, I still didn't see any fire. He said, why don't you turn around? Which I did, and the whole backyard was on fire.
And I said, well, let's climb up on the kids' play set, the swing set. And I did, and we climbed up. I climbed up first, and she was below me. And I looked out in the canyon, and I saw the fire racing down from the canyon. And I said, this is terrible.
Well, what I thought when I went outside, when my dad said, it's hailing, it's snowing, because the ashes were coming down. I'm like, how could it be on a hot day, hailing or snowing? Because I didn't know there were ashes or anything. And I got scared.
He went outside to look for this fire. There was this tremendous amount of smoke. We were just about ready to sit down for dinner, had the dinner on the table and everything. The kids were sitting there, and he had gone out to check what all this extra smoke was all about. And he came back in, he said, get the kids and get out of here. And I just kind of, he'd always said, fire's no problem here, we've taken care of, there's no brush, there's no problem. And when I heard that, I didn't even question him. I just said, kids, just get in the car. I said, don't take anything, just get in the car.
I saw this weird orange glow. About 15 seconds, maybe 10 seconds later, I went over and I opened up the window, the curtains. I looked outside and there was smoke and flames coming over the hill. I said, no, this couldn't be. And I had to look again. I closed the curtains up and I had to look again. And so I opened them up and I looked out there and I just, there's a fire. I yelled, fire, fire.
I was just getting dinner on the table, and my kitchen looks at the mountains, faces that direction. And my kitchen just lit up bright orange. I mean, just instant. It was instant orange.
And all of a sudden, there was this wind gust, and I'll never forget. I saw fire in the air, and this ball of fire hit the ground right below the canyon of our neighbor's house, and it chewed up the dry brush instantaneously. And I said, Lil, we have to get out of here.
For the first time, it dawned on us that this is for real. This is really real. You think this can be happening to us, and you're thinking, it just can't be real. But when you see the flames that close and can feel the heat, we knew it was the real thing.
There was a wind that preceded the fire, and when I felt that coming on us, then I knew that it was get out or die.
This is fire up at Painted Cave. A lot of smoke and flame is showing from Fairview and 101. Lincoln 1, meet me on Creek 1. This thing really has the potential of really being bad. Brush 24. We have heavy black smoke showing. Looks like it's in heavy fuel. Flame height is probably about 15 feet. Heavy black smoke height of the flames about 15 feet. Heavy. Dick, are you copying the size up 24s and the reports 1 to 2 acres in heavy brush? This will be the paint incident. Coordinations will take that over. You'll be paint command. Also, we got any air tankers? We're checking on the status now. A lot of regional activity, but we'll check. We can get one up there. We might be able to do some good. We got a lot of wind up here. I'm still on the path. I got a glimpse of it coming up, and it's really turning up there.
We heard the county dispatch the fire. The firefighter who's sitting behind me says, "It is going." And I knew from Wade Don's vocal inflection, and I couldn't look behind me and take a look at it because I'm trying to watch the traffic, was one of concern. All of us realizing that you're against overwhelming odds. If you can't get that fire within the first 2 acres of the fire, it's basically up to Mother Nature.
We jumped in the brush truck, we switched engines, and we're filled up with water and headed towards it. Well, by the time we got there, it was already at the bottom of the canyon.
We had about 3 minutes to collect things in the house, that was all. And you make really crazy decisions, like I took all my bills that were due. I took this basket of bills, and as I was grabbing them, I ran by some mementos I had from my children when they were real little, and I left those because I thought, oh, they won't burn. And I should have taken those and left the bills. They didn't matter.
At that point, realizing that this was far worse than any fire that we had had, knowing that the children and my wife weren't home and knowing they were probably safe, the wind was gusting, the power went out, the smell was putrid. I then went through the house, each room I could, this all took place within 2 minutes, looking around, realizing that we may never see the house again, and the kids, and we all needed something. So I went to the kids' room, and we have 3 boys. I looked around, a room filled with toys and pictures and everything. Well, what do you do? What do you do? And first thing I grabbed were baseball cards. They love their baseball cards, so I grabbed a few books of baseball cards. Then I went into our bedroom, and I looked around, and my wife had just given me, our wedding anniversary was 2 days before. We celebrated our 12th anniversary, and she had just given me a painting that she had finished, so I grabbed that off the wall, and a baby calendar that she was doing the illustrations for. I grabbed that, so here I have the baseball cards and all these things here, and went out to the living room area and to the kitchen, and next to the kitchen we had all our photo albums. We had about 20 books of photo albums. Unfortunately, we had stored them quite high, so I couldn't reach them, but there were 2 albums down low, so I grabbed those. I ran out to the car, threw them in, came back in. The dog was staring at me, so I picked up Gabriel, didn't pick him up, he's almost as big as I am. I grabbed his collar, and he was panicking, and I said, okay, Gabriel, you have to get in the car. And he didn't want to get into the car, so I pushed him in, and he got into the car.
I yelled at my friend, move your cars, and I yelled at my other friend, grab the dogs in your bedroom. And then I went in and grabbed a senior citizen cat that's about 17 years old out of one room because she never goes outside, put her under one arm, ran by the desk, grabbed an address book and an envelope with some statements and some checks in it under the other arm, ran out the door, put those in my car. My car had been on a charger all day long. My battery had been on a charger all day long. It had just been taken off about an hour before that. And then I went back in, grabbed the doves in the dove cage, and whatever I could next to the doves, a couple files of nonsensical things, and ran out to the car with those, called to my little French poodle, had her run to my car, and then I heard the fire right behind the avocado grove.
I grabbed my headgear because I thought I thought it was really expensive because orthodontist and stuff, and then I grabbed my dog because she always sleeps with me and she's on my bed, and I grabbed her and my blanket from when I was a baby.
And we had just come back from the swimming pool, and they were in their swimsuits, and my little boy was in his diaper, no shoes, nothing. And we grabbed one dog, our little dog, got in the car. I had my purse, and that was it. I mean, I didn't think to run back and, hey, I should get my grandmother's quilt or, you know.
And we got the horses from the farthermost south pasture, put halters, and started leading them across the creek. We have a creek that completely bisects the property. And the fire was coming from one side. We had to get the horses across immediately.
Yeah, that the same time she speaks of that, I had took off immediately and got 2 of the grooms and rushed up to the top of the hill. And when we get up on top of the hill where we saw the glow, we had not witnessed any fire yet. The boys took off in one direction. I took off in the other to see what was happening, and then I saw the fire coming back from the opposite canyon, coming back across toward us. And by the time I was able to turn around and get back to the truck, I was unable to get down the hill again because I couldn't see it. The boys had to lead me down, and when I got down there, they had already moved some of the horses, and Diane told me to get the 2-horse trailer and get our mare, Farah, and her son and get out of there. Well, by the time I started out of the valley, I was going up in through flames up our driveway. When I got to the top, there were two firefighters up there, and I asked them to please get down. I said I didn't know whether my family would get out or not, and they said they couldn't. It was completely out of control.
We took the horses across the creek and put as many as we could in the pastures that were there in front of the barn. It was already after 6, and the horses had been put in the barn for the night, the ones that stayed in. And with the embers that were flying and the rocks that were flying, we had to make a judgment whether to leave them there, perhaps protect them from flying embers, or to take them out. We didn't know what was the best, considering the circumstances. And we left the horses in the barn that were there. Subsequently, we found out that 4 horses that we had turned loose ran into the barn also. Their carcasses were found in there the next day. The fire did very strange things, jumped around. It burned something to the ground and then left the thing next to it just standing there unscathed. And the fire came down the side of the mountain, hit our driveway, jumped the pastures, burned from the bottom up the other side of the mountain. So here in this valley, this little strip, was the horses that were left there remained alive. They lived through the smoke. They lived through... I wanted to get our other stallion out, and the only way to get him out was to lead him out. As he told you, our driveway is quite long, quite steep. I tried to lead him out by hanging out of the car, hanging out of my son's car, and they were holding my legs and I was holding him, but he was just too excited. It was too much for him. He was frightened, and the smoke was already thick, and the fire had already come down and was crossing the creek and burning. It was burning the green foliage that you'd think would have so much moisture was burning in the creek. So I had to put him into the pasture.
Turned around again, and one of the palm trees in the pool area was on fire. And about the time I put that out, I noticed that the 2 neighbors' houses were burning, which were only about 40, 50 feet away. And at that time, I decided maybe the hose wasn't the idea, and ran into the house and was going to start getting some things out of the house. However, by that time, the black cloud had come over, and in a matter of minutes, it was just gone from complete daylight to darkness like nighttime. The lights were out, although it was still bright daylight out on the site. It was pitch black, just like night. Stumbling around in the house, finally got 1 box of photographs, and we left. Actually had to drive through about 20, 30 feet of flames to get out. We have a long driveway that was burning on both sides. And after I got out, I changed my mind and decided I might go back. And as I drove back, I ran across a fellow who had been down in the valley behind, off to the left side as you're going up San Antonio Creek Road. There's a deep valley down there. And this gentleman had walked up the hill in the fire, and his arms were burnt, and he was in pretty bad shape. He was kind of staggering up La Riata Lane. I saw him and stopped, and all he said was burned emergency, and so I threw him in the truck and found a squad car out on San Antonio Creek Road. They wouldn't take him. They were too busy trying to make sure people were out of their homes. So I drove him down to Goleta Valley Hospital.
I got about a third of the way down and came around a bend and looked down into the canyon, and the entire canyon was filled with flame. That was all that could be seen. Incredible flame, a wall of flame, and the noise was amazing. So, of course, I turned around as quickly as I could and drove away. And I realized at that point that I didn't really have any place to go, so I went back to work. And everyone working there was, concerned about what was going on. And I glibly said, well, I guess I'll be sleeping in my car tonight, and went back to work. I guess you would call that the denial phase.
hearing this rustle, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. I didn't see anybody in this neighbor's house over here. No cars, no nothing. Everybody must have been gone. And later I found out they were. Drove up the hill. My car was sputtering because the fire was taking the oxygen from my engine. I found this out later. I thought it was maybe because it had been on the charger all day or it was low on gas, but no. Actually, when I went down the pass, it didn't sputter at all. I got away from the fire. A few seconds later, maybe 5 to 10 seconds later, my friends drove out, but they couldn't follow me because the road that I was on was engulfed in flames right after I drove up.
So Gabriel and I drove up our driveway to the street, and I got about 20 yards from our house, and I stopped. I couldn't believe what I saw. I saw our neighbor's house is on fire. I saw oleander bushes that weren't supposed to burn igniting into flames. I smelled smells that I never thought I would smell and never want to smell again. The sky was black. The wind was blowing. And all of a sudden I couldn't see anymore. And branches were hitting the car on fire. And the dog was sitting with his paw on my lap, panting. And I was talking to the dog. I said, Gabriel, I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea what's going to happen, Gabriel. Everything's on fire. And I couldn't see anything. And I realized that we couldn't just sit there. I had no idea if the car was going to explode or if we would be okay. And I couldn't see anything. It was black as night. So I closed my eyes, and the first thought that came into my mind was the Shema, which is a declaration of faith. And I recited the Shema and realized if I was going to get out of there, I was not going to get out of there on my own. I needed help. And after reciting the Shema, I kept my eyes closed and just let the car go, and we proceeded up the street. I have no idea how I made it up the street, but I did. I've driven that street thousands of times, probably out of memory, maybe with some guidance from above, I have no idea. But I got to the corner, I knew there was a corner, I turned the wheel, unfortunately I missed, and the car got into a ditch. And I remember opening my eyes saying, I'm not gonna die in a ditch. If we're gonna die, we're not gonna die in a ditch. And I put the car in reverse, got out of the ditch, and there on the horizon up above, I saw the sparkling blue roof of the Greek Orthodox Church. Knowing that was on the corner, I steered the car forward and then was able to start making it down the hill.
We warned everybody as we went down. I think ours was one of the first houses to burn in the neighborhood. We were right at the origin of the fire. So as we went, there were a lot of people who were just hanging around their houses watching the fire. They weren't packing anything up. They weren't making any provisions for leaving. And we yelled at them to pack up and get going.
Well, we have a groom, his name is Jose, who's been with us since the very beginning of our horse farm, who stayed with us. And this young man stayed with me and wouldn't leave the farm till I left the farm. The boys had taken our son had taken both of their cars across the bridge and were ready to evacuate. And we did at the very last minute. We didn't have a choice. I mean, the flames were there, they were on us already, and we had to go up the driveway.
There was an eerie stillness about the situation, considering the tremendous amount of activity that was going on. For me, I couldn't hear anything. It was like it was completely quiet. I knew I had a mission. I wanted to get into my house and get out of my house what I could. And I blocked everything else out. I kicked open the front door of my house, turned on the light switch, but the power had all been burned out from the area. So it was pitch black inside the house. I knew I had only a few seconds in which to grab something of value. I looked around, really groped, felt around for something that I could take. I put a couple of items under my arms, ran up the hillside, and encountered a fireman running down the street. The look on this fireman's face, I will never forget. It was one of total terror. The fireman, I figured, was someone who had been through fires many times before, would not have this particular look. But he knew something really, really bad was happening and was going to happen. He told me, drop everything you have and run for your life.
personally, I had a lot of fears at that time because when I was a child, our house burnt. So fire has always been something to me that's very violent. So the minute I knew that people were being affected and things, I think I flashed back on some of the things that happened when I was a child, and I was really concerned about the people. And even though it's my job to take care of the people, there is that fear for the people, I guess. So personally, I had that fear, and so I went into getting things mobilized even quicker because I wanted to make sure that the people were taken care of and they didn't have to deal with the fears and things I had to when I was a child.
Intensity and the weather conditions that were present and atmospheric conditions that were present during the Painted Cave Fire probably are the most severe of any of the fires in recent memory on the Front Range. Other fires have been disastrous as well, but this thing had 60-mile-per-hour winds. It had single-digit humidity and triple-digit temperatures. That's a lethal combination. I compare it to the Painted Cave Fire. I compare it to a tornado. It is a freakish phenomenon of nature, and luckily it doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it is just absolutely awesome and terrifying. The Painted Cave Fire, the first 3 to 4 hours of the Painted Cave Fire probably are about as intense a fire as anyone has ever seen.
Seen what nature can do and how little we can do to survive under those circumstances. And that's the way it felt the night of the fire. People were really scared that they too were going to lose their homes or maybe their lives. And it was an experience I'll never forget.
So we had shelter the first night, and it was quite comfortable. I didn't have a toothbrush or a change of underwear, a change of clothes. All I had were the clothes on my back.
We then spent that rest of that late early evening, late evening, whatever it was, at our friend's house down near the Magnolia Shopping Center, and their power went out, so we had no connection with the outside world. All we had was a portable radio. And listening to the radio, we thought the whole city was in its last throes of existence. And streets were being closed according to the radio. We didn't know if we would have to evacuate this house or where we would go.
There was no question in my mind that my house would not make it through the fire. So my next thought was to get to my parents' house on another part of town and make sure that they were safe. I instructed them to pack up what was important to them just in case the wind would change and come their direction. At that point, I went up on the hillside and looked over the city to watch the fire, which I did all evening to make sure the wind did not blow it in the direction of my parents' house.
There's a very thin line between saving people's houses and losing your life. And what I could hear on the radio was they were skating right down the middle of that. I think that the people from the county, city, all the agencies that I was aware of, I think they did an absolutely outstanding job under horrendous conditions. I'm standing at the pump and we've got the smoke and the ash and all of that that's coming over the top of the fire engine, and it was like within 2 seconds, suddenly there was a cool breeze. And when the breeze hit me, I looked up and I could see the stars, and that's the first time that I could actually see the stars. And I really don't know what time it was, because your time frame sometimes is just out of proportion. But it seems to me that it was around midnight, and the cool ocean breeze had come in there. To me, that was like a relief, because the wind had stopped, and that is the factor that makes the big difference about whether we can catch the fire or we can't.
I wanted to see whether I owned a house or not, so a friend of mine took his son's mountain bike, and he borrowed a bike from somebody, and we rode back up into the fire area. And that was real eerie. You know, there were still places that were going up even then, and this was at 1:30 at night. You know, they were still burning. But most of the area was just kind of like what you picture a scene after war would be like. You know, a little twig burning here, an ember here. There was a lot of gas jets that were lighting up. I mean, it was dark that night.
He said they were like
They
torches.
just lit, you didn't need a flashlight or anything. Everything was still well lit by what was still burning up there, you know, and there was water running down the street from all the broken water pipes and everything. And it was real quiet. You didn't hear any animal life at all, you know, and you really didn't hear the fire. And it was just kind of eerie riding your bike up there and just seeing house after house not there anymore. And then we got to our house and it wasn't there.
Turned the corner and it was gone.
It was gone.
next morning, we heard on the radio that some people were being allowed to go up. So at around noontime, my wife and I drove over to Tucker's Grove Park area, and the fire was still raging on parts of the area, but not our immediate. And with the proper identification, they led us up the hill. And it was amazing. The first part of the street, when you start climbing up San Antonio Creek Road, the houses were fine. And then you make one turn, and all of a sudden, nothing was there. And the images that came to my mind really was this was just like a war zone. There was nothing left. Things were smoldering. It was just like a major bomb had hit and destroyed everything. I was not prepared to see what we saw. And so we continued to drive, and everywhere we looked, there wasn't anything left, just smoldering rubble. We got to our street and drove down, and in front of our house was a white picket fence, and it was still there. And I remember stopping the car for a moment thinking, this is incredible. Somehow everything survived. This can't be true, but this is something else. Drove a little further, realizing it wasn't true, that just the fence survived, and that was the only thing left of our house, was our white picket fence. It was an indescribable feeling, knowing that we had lived in this house for 13 years and there was nothing left but dust. The only thing standing was the picket fence, the one wall to a shower, and the water heater, and part of the chimney. Knowing just 24 hours before, everything we had and loved was in the house.
And I looked over around the corner, and the house wasn't there. I looked for my house wasn't there. I looked around, and nothing was there. There was one recreational trailer that for some reason didn't get touched on the hillside way up above, where there weren't many bushes, but the rest of it was gone. Everything else was gone.
I had some notion that my place was spared, and of course was very disappointed to find that it had not been spared.
Very quiet, not a bird. All you could hear was the broken pipe and fires still burning, and she and I and Boomer, our dog, walking up, and it was like walking to another planet. When we got up about halfway, the forest fighters had a van, and they stopped us and said, could they give us a lift? And we said yes, so we hopped on the back, and we told them where we were going. When we got there, they said, you know, it's completely gone. And we said, we figured that, but they said, you know, you still have some horses that are alive. Well, with this, she and I took off like driven by some unknown, and ran down we have a driveway that's down in the valley that's probably 1,500, 2,000 yards of that to get down to the bottom, and she and I ran like two possessed people. And when we got down there, we noticed one of our lead stallions who had jumped out of the fence, and because the pasture that he was in was still locked, so he had to clear this 5-foot fence, and he was standing by the middle pasture behind it, protecting 3 mares that had babies in there. And we rushed over to him, and he couldn't even move. His whole throat and his mouth had been burned, and he'd been burned on his body, and we had to get water to him, and my wife started to lead Jalil, and he couldn't walk. He could only shuffle. And we didn't know whether or not he'd make it, but he did make it, and he's fine now. But it was such an unreal situation. The barn was gone. We had lost some 14 horses, all Egyptian, straight Egyptian horses, that breeding that we had done for a number of years to get and to be recognized as good breeders. All of our stock was gone.
up there a number of times, and I'd start going through them, and after about 5-10 minutes, I'd just turn around and walk away. I'd say to myself, what am I doing this for? Because everything was literally incinerated. There were a few things that were salvaged, a piece of that, but everything was broken or pretty well burned or melted. And digging through the ashes, the few times I did it, I just kept on saying to myself, what for? What am I going to do with it if I find it?
The other thing that we had set on early on was to find my wife's ring, her wedding ring. She had been at the pool swimming with the children and didn't bring her jewelry with her. So a friend of ours came up. We knew where it was before the fire, and so he sat down for 3 hours and lined off the place by about 6 by 8 and went piece of wallboard and piece of whatever by piece, not with a shovel but with his hands. And about 3 hours later started yelling that he found something sparkling, and we dug in there, and there was her ring. The diamond was sparkling in the sunshine. The ring was all black, but the diamond was still sparkling.
I had a collection of books that I had been amassing for about 30 years, and that was gone. But there was a glimmer of hope when I approached the site, because it looked as though there were stacks of books there, and I couldn't imagine how in the world that could possibly be. And of course I walked over to them and reached out and touched the stack of books, and it just blew away. It was nothing but ash.
What was harder than sifting through that, because there was always the hope you'd find some little precious thing, was when they cleared the debris, and I was sitting there and I saw this laborer pick up what used to be my stove and toss it in a pile. And that's when I cried. That's when I realized everything was just garbage. Everything, our piano, nothing was worth anything anymore.
Right after the fire, I was in such shock that emotions weren't really at the forefront. It was more like act, survive. Emotions were something that came out later, once the shock had subsided.
After the fire, I was disoriented, and I had like about 6 months minimum of walking around in a semi-daze. I still have my moments, however, I'm pretty well on track now.
It's kind of hard to express the range of feelings, and I know I've seen people on television during some of the news coverage of the fire in tears, and I remember one time seeing a man in tears because his home had been burned, and I remember feeling as though I wanted to cry too, but there was no time. There was just too much to do and so much going on.
Building a house isn't something that we probably would have chosen to do. We're not in that kind of frame of mind. And I feel that it's kind of robbing some of my life away from me this year. There were other things that I would rather have done this year. I seem to be spending all my free time picking out toilets and fixtures and making decisions.
My feeling of vulnerability before this fire, we really have been very lucky. Our kids have been healthy. We've never had any big family disasters or, car crashes or anything like that. And then this fire came, and it was like it kind of took that away. I felt like, now things can happen to us. It's like, once something happens, it's like your good luck's over or something. I don't know what it was. It just, I felt very protective of my kids. Like, since this has happened, something else can happen to us now.
It was very, very hard to go into that big gymnasium and go through clothing that people had donated. I mean, I've donated clothing to the Salvation Army, got some old things, or I used to donate them to the one down on State Street that benefited the animal shelter. But it was very difficult to go in there and I've bought things from those places too. You can find some really nice clothes. But to go there because I had a t-shirt and a pair of pants and some shoes, and that was it, was hard. It was hard to admit that I needed help. And I think, I don't really know this for a fact, but I think it was hard for an awful lot of people there. One could tell that they were a little, maybe embarrassed or ashamed at having to stand in line and wait for a handout. It was a good experience. It was really good, because it kind of drove home the something that I've known but have had difficulty accepting, that one can be an individual up to a certain point, but beyond that, you need help. And it was there. It was really wonderful.
You know, I was grateful for it. I really was. I have to say that we questioned taking, you know, all this stuff from the Red Cross because
We didn't think we were needy.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, we do real well, and you know, we have relatives that can help us and everything. And I always felt like the Red Cross money should go to people that, you know, had a lot less than we did. So I did. I felt guilty about taking it, but our friends kept saying, you know, that's what it's there for. You know, you need it. And so we did, and it did it. It helped us.
It helped. I think it helped us
And
emotionally.
It helped us get going anyway.
One of the benefits, I would say, for myself as a result of the fire is I've learned to ask for help.
But the Red Cross and the other organizations were really marvelous. They really came through. There were people there who were so good at what they did. You know, they needed information from us. They needed to fill out all the blanks, fill out the forms. And they were so gentle about it. It was really nice.
And mainly, I guess what was so heartwarming was to find out that I did my job right in the first place, is to make sure the services were in place for the people. One goal that I've always had since I became the director is to make sure that there's no breakdown in services.
We went to the market, it was about 2 weeks after the fire, got a can of coffee of all things, and brought it home and looked in the drawer and realized there was no can opener. And I remember at that time throwing something against the wall saying, this is ridiculous, there's not even a can opener. So the feelings, the emotions are just so hard, and they're with you all the time. But it's a mix, it really is. It's sadness, it's gratefulness that everyone's okay, and to tell you the truth, it's also a sense of reinvigoration of spirit, knowing that the community came together. I say that again and again because it was one of the most wonderful experiences, to seeing all of these people, some of whom you've never known or seen in your life and probably never will again, coming up and asking what they can do and meaning it. I mean, really, truly meaning it. It was real special and is real special.
I decided every day that I live is a blessing. And so I get up, and I usually have a smile on my face, and I did before anyway, but now it just, well, this is great, you know, I'm living another day. If something goes wrong during the day, I say, oh, well, you know, at least there's something to go wrong. I'm here. I'm alive.
I think our family weathered it pretty well. We decided right in the beginning that we weren't going to let it tear us apart or argue with each other over it. So we've made a good team, and I think if we got through this, we could get through almost anything.
You get this spirit inside that says that I can survive no matter what. Just keep throwing it my way, I can survive. I know a lot of people who have that spirit. I guess one could even say that America was built with that spirit. That we can get together and survive whatever disaster comes our way. And when I've seen television coverage of other disasters, tornadoes, floods, that's the thing that sticks in my mind. People getting together, doing superhuman jobs, superhuman efforts to help their neighbors. They might not even know their neighbors' names, but this is the feeling I got during the fire. People helping and wanting to make sure that everybody was helped in some way.
And one mare that was in one of these little pastures was in foal. She gave birth in July. She came through the fire, and July 20th, right on schedule, she gave birth to a beautiful little filly. Just really a gorgeous filly. And we tried to find an appropriate name for her. We've named her Marusa, and Marusa means protected by God. She's really lovely.
We put the place up for sale, and the place will be sold. We have to move because we can't afford to live there any longer, and emotionally, even if we could, I doubt that we could. But life goes on, so we just have to go somewhere else and leave this beautiful valley that we were living in because of a fire.
And we'll all be on our feet again, and all the growth will come back again. And out of this fire and the ashes, we all have a lot to look forward to.
Tree lines a gray blue wall. Twilight trips my mind. Will old lang syne be sung in A? Will A duet? Full moon, you toss and turn, and silver light you light. Snuffed out candles smoke, a cigarette of penance, then a prayer, and innocence, where innocent. Your heart's not broken, it's just bent. And cast your verdict and break those chains, innocent. Trim tight thunder clouds, shroud sails of linen fall, and sirens beckon, steer this way. To catch all castaways, reach the shores of Kismet, and shot heard round the world, smoking gun of pride drops, empty then with air, and innocence, where